In this demo, I'm going to show you how to add a custom tab to a Microsoft Teams app and use the single sign-on capability in Microsoft Teams to obtain an access token that we can use to submit requests to Microsoft Graph. Now, this demo assumes that I've already created the Azure AD app in the previous exercise in this module. Developing Microsoft Teams apps requires a Microsoft 365 tenant, Microsoft Teams configured for development, and the necessary tools installed in your workstation. For the Microsoft 365 tenant, follow the instructions in the Microsoft Teams documentation on how to prepare your Microsoft 365 tenant for obtaining a developer tenant if you don't already have a Microsoft 365 account. Make sure that you have also enabled Microsoft Teams for your organization. Microsoft Teams must be configured to enable custom apps and allow custom apps to be uploaded to your tenant in order to build custom apps for Microsoft Teams. Again, follow the instructions on the same Prepare Your Microsoft 365 tenant page that I previously mentioned. You'll use Node.js to create a custom Microsoft Teams app in this module and in this demo. The exercises and demos in this module assume that you have the following tools installed on your developer workstation: Node.js version 12 or higher, NPM version 6 or higher, Gulp version 4 or higher, Yeoman version 3 or higher, the Yeoman generator for Microsoft Teams version 3 or higher, and the latest version of Visual Studio Code. You must have the minimum versions of these prerequisites installed on your workstation in order to complete this demo. So we're going to start by creating our app. So I'm going to start by creating a new folder for my project, which is just going to be called Learn MS Teams SSO tab. And then I'm going to jump into that folder. I'm going to start the process by typing in Yo Teams. Now Yeoman's going to launch and ask me a series of questions. So let's go ahead and just enter these in. A lot of the values, I'm just going to accept the default values, like the solution name. We're going to leave it in the current folder. The name of the project, we'll just call this SSO Teams tab. Company name, that's fine. Manifest is default version is fine. Scaffolding, fine. Tab is fine. The URL doesn't matter in this case. I'm just going to leave that alone. Would you like to show a loading indicator? No. The tab name, let's just call this SSO tab. What kind of a tab? We'll leave it as configurable for a team. And do you want to support SSO? And I'll say yes. Now I need to go fetch the ID for my Azure AD app that I created. So let's go grab that. Application registrations. There's our app. And there's the ID. So I'll copy that and paste that in. And then it needs the app ID URI. So as I showed you in the previous demo, I'm just going to use API, the domain where I'm hosting it, which is my ngrok.io, and then the ID of the app. And then we'll leave the last option as the default. So now what I've done, or what the generator is doing, is it's created the folder and all the files associated with my project. And now it's running npm install to install everything that my project needs. So let's go ahead and open this up in VS Code. And there's a few changes we're going to have to make to this right off the bat. So I'm going to look at the env file that contains all of our environment variables. And I'm going to set up the subdomain for testing to be my name. Again, this is only, I'm only doing this because I have a licensed version of ngrok. So this is not required for you if you're using the free version. You just need to remember that you need to update your app registration and when you upload your app to Microsoft Teams every time that you restart ngrok, because this URL will change. Your dynamic ngrok URL will change. Now the other thing I need to do here is we have these last two values that were added as the Azure AD app ID and the URI that I provided during the app scaffolding process, is answering all those questions for Yeoman. I need to grab the secret for my app as well. So let's go ahead and I'll just make a copy of this and make this the secret. So let me go fetch or create a secret that we can use. So I'm going to go to certificates and secrets. I'll add a new secret. I'll select add. And then this one right here. So we'll grab this and I'll paste that in. Now, our web application in the project consists of both static and dynamic assets. So the static assets, such as the images, HTML, and CSS files, these are all stored in the public folder, while the dynamic assets, such as TypeScript and React controls, are all found in the client folder. Now for this project, the tab is implemented, as you can see here, go to the TSX file, it's implemented as a React functional component in this SSO tab folder within the client subfolder. And each of the components within that folder are hosted in corresponding HTML files that you'll find in this public folder as well. So if I look at SSO tab, you'll see config, index, and remove, where we have config, remove, and then index is the default one, which is that control that you see right there. Now, when I look at this SSO tab folder, this file exports a single functional component that returns the React component's user interface. And you can see this is found at the bottom of the file here in this return statement. The default tab is implemented using React hooks. So the use effect hook, which if I scroll up a little bit, the use effect hook right here performs side effects when a component mounts or when React changes the DOM. The default tab consists of 2 of these hooks. The job of the first hook that I have selected here, this runs after the component has rendered and first checks to see if it's running within Microsoft Teams. And if it is, it calls the getAuthToken method from the Teams JavaScript SDK to obtain an ID token from Microsoft Teams. Once this method is called, it triggers the Microsoft Teams to obtain an ID token from Azure AD's token endpoint for the currently signed in user. And once that's received, the success callback decodes the token, the success callback, it decodes the token to extract the user's name, and then it sets the state on the component to that person's name using the setState method. So notice the getAuthToken method accepts an object with 3 parameters or 3 properties. In addition to the 2 callbacks, you can see here that I also have this resources as well, which is the ID or the application ID URI that we registered in Azure AD when I created this. Now that's defined inside of my environment variables in my .env file in this project. Azure AD automatically trusts the Microsoft Teams client to act on the user's behalf because, as you saw in the previous demo, I granted it the access as user scope. Now, I also have a server-side component to this. So under server and server.ts, I'm going to need to make a change to this later. But right now, if you want to just see how this works, you can always go through and just review the comments for this once you create one of these projects on your own. So let's test this, install it, and see how it looks. I'm going to run gulp ngrok serve to spin the process up. So now that our project is running, or our web server is running, let's jump back over to Edge. And we will go to teams.microsoft.com and let's install our app. So I'm going to do that by going to the General channel, and I'm going to select the plus icon. We'll select Manage Apps. We will then select Uploading a Custom App. And I'm going to go to our Teams SSO tab. And we'll select that. And we will install it. And then once it's installed, we'll go back to our channel. I'll add the tab. And then I'll select my SSO Teams tab that you see listed here. And it's a configurable tab, so we can put anything in this default configuration dialog that pops up. Select Save. And from there, now, what this is showing is it shows that our app is working and single sign-on is working. And the way we can tell that is because the current user name is being selected. This is being shared from inside of our tab. Now, the way this is working is that the tab, as you saw from the code, is calling the authenticator, the get access token or get auth token method on the Teams SDK. That's triggering Teams to go to Azure AD and obtain an access token for the current user. That ID token is then being returned to our tab, and then our tab is able to parse that and to show the current user's name.